Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC Rich, and I'm joined by my guest, Todd Nicholas of Wheel Tree Press. Hey Todd, welcome to the show.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Great, it's so exciting to talk to you again. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
See, Todd, I know from the Jankcast, but we also got to play a little bit of play-by-post, and
it's true, yeah.
I'm a big fan of your stuff, Todd. So I got to know, we always kick this off, how long have you been playing PBTA games, and what was your gateway?
This is actually an easy one for me because I was a playtester on Apocalypse World.
What?
Yes, I was. I actually had the playbooks. I don't know how many people even know this. They used to be like note card sized. Because they would, so you know how they're all the big sheets, like in the early playtest, they were tiny, and you like actually folded it in fourths. And like I remember thinking that was kind of cool. When I saw the big ones, I was like, oh, but I kind of liked the tiny ones. So we played a game.
That's nice. I played Apocalypse World when we had the tiny note card.
Right. This is deep cut gamer hipsterism right here.
Love it.
Yeah, so I played a game with some of the folks from the Jankcast and some of the folks who would hang out at the Chicagoland games. It must have been 2008 or 2009, like during the playtesting of it, and it melted my brain. It was because I remember not getting it. Like I really strongly remember like Timo was running the game, and I think Timo got it a little bit better than the rest of us. And I just remember him being like, "No, it's like." You just do a thing and then that triggers one of these moves, and me going like, so like, do I get to decide when I roll? And he was like, sort of. You do. So yeah, so Apocalypse World was my gateway game because I playtested it. It was a really cool experience.
That is pretty awesome. All right, well, let's jump on over here and read a Sitch.
That would be great.
Read a Sitch. Todd, I understand, mostly because I've listened to you talk about it on Jankcast, you have bounced around the United States for quite a while, and that's kind of impacted your ability to have an ongoing game. Isn't that right?
It has. So I'm originally from the Chicago area, but I'm a professor by trade, and I was a visiting professor out in Washington for a while. That's when you and I were playing together and doing PvP. Mm-hmm. I had a golden era there where when I was finishing up my degree in Chicago, I was playing a lot. And then when I moved to Washington, I was playing a lot. I had a regular group there. I was doing a lot of online gaming. And then I got a job as an assistant professor somewhere where there was not a strong gaming community. There was a board gaming community, and if I wanted to play Dungeon Crawl Classics, I could. It's nothing against that game. It's just not my game.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a local group, and I kind of dropped the online gaming because at that time I had a toddler, and I just accepted my first assistant professor position, and I just didn't have time.
Right.
But now I've moved back to Illinois, a little further afield than Chicagoland, but I can now go up about once a month to game with some of the folks in the Jankcast who are all still in Chicago, and we're actually doing usually for actual plays. We just released an actual play of Alex Roberts' Kickstarter game Starcrossed that Joe and I did, and we've also been recording an actual play of The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power, which we'll talk about. So we were about 5 or 6 sessions into that, and we should be playing again next week. So about once a month I get to go up to do that, which has been a lot of fun.
Cool. So now here you are going from one-shots and not a whole lot of gaming to returning to a steady group.
Right.
Is there anything you've observed as you kind of step back into that routine?
Yes, actually. I mean, I wasn't not gaming. I did a little bit of PvP, particularly early on when I moved to Arkansas. And I was doing one-shots. I went to Forge 2 years in a row. I went to Gen Con 2 years in a row. And I was doing one-shots at all those cons and things like that. Every once in a while, I would wind up doing a one-shot online or something like that. And particularly, so with Powered by the Apocalypse systems, there does tend to be things that kick in as you play over a period of time. Mm-hmm. Often built into the games. Your characters advance. The advancement allows you to get new moves. The new moves allow you to do interesting things. I just saw someone online today, a friend of mine online, who's emceeing a Apocalypse World game right now, refer to it as juggling knives. That emceeing Apocalypse World is endlessly juggling knives, right? And you're just waiting for one of them to lop one of your fingers off. And I think it's hard to get that in the one-shot experience. A one-shot can be great, and I've run a bunch of great one-shots of PBTA games. But I think there is something that kind of gets into a rhythm with the kind of ongoing campaign play that you don't necessarily see in the one shot. So one thing I've been noticing is that when I run one shots of The Sword, the Crown, the Unspeakable Power, I tend to push very hard. I do a lot of let's see how many people we can kill in one session, right? Now that I'm doing this, our first session was kind of like that. So when the AP starts to drop, you'll hear our first session's a bloodbath. And then that first session kind of sets the table for what has since then been a bit slower with big dramatic moments. Big things happen, but a bit slower, a bit more kind of giving the characters a lot of time to pause and interact and grow and assess their potential directions and figure out who their allies and enemies are. They've been able to do some big things. Joe is playing the crown in that game. He's ruling over kind of a city-state, and he and one of the other characters who's kind of his advisor went to war effectively and marched off to another kingdom and conquered it, which is something that's happened every once in a while in SCUP games I've run, but not nearly to this extent where we actually wound up changing one of the moves slightly because Joe was like, oh, I think that this is how this should work when you do this. We went, yes, exactly. That's exactly what it should do. So it was probably one of the more extensive military campaigns I've had. It took about a session and a half to do. So that's all been really fun. And I was missing that in not just in Powered by the Apocalypse games, but in games in general, that there's a lot of things that kind of fall into place when you get to have kind of extended campaign play. It's been very cool.
Awesome. Is there any advice for people who've only done one-shots of PBTA coming into a more extended campaign or trying to broaden that out?
That's a good question. I always think that think of a lot of TV shows. I mean, The Sword, the Crown, the Unspeakable Power is based very much on Game of Thrones. Other shows that I think are good at this, you could think of something like Sons of Anarchy. The Wire has some of this. There's a lot of TV shows that do this sort of really good long-form operatic storytelling, which I think PBTA is really good at, and I think gives the MC a lot of tools to use. And we could talk about this later. We push towards that in Sword, the Crown, the Unspeakable Power a bit. We really kind of wanted to make it a game where you could think very hard about how all the characters were related, and then think very hard about big dramatic things you could drop in that would upset that apple cart, and give, on the one hand, players moves to do that, and on the other hand, give the MC moves and things that they could do to do that. So I always think that one of the things I like to think about as an MC in particular for a long form or a campaign game that has really kind of come to mind as I've been playing this one is that the big dramatic things you do, the more you set them up and the more you kind of hook everyone into them, that's always good. Your characters, we kind of say this in the book, actually, your players at the table will respond to NPCs, right? When you put an NPC in front of them, someone's going to go, ooh, I like this person, and want to chit chat with them. And then someone else is going to go, ooh, I don't like them. And, ideally your players will react to the NPCs. And to me, when I see multiple people all start having a relationship with an NPC, particularly different relationships, it's like, something's got to happen to that person. They don't have to die, but something's got to happen to that person. So right now we have Megan's character is a Black Hood who's kind of like an assassin, a thief, and she has a secret son effectively who's a courtier in Joe's character's court. Joe immediately upon seeing the son was like, ooh, I like him. I'm going on a date with him. He can't say no. I'm the king. I'm gonna march right up to him and be like, would you like to have dinner with me? And of course he said yes. He's a social climber. The prince asking him to go on a date. He was like, well, yes, absolutely. And this just set this up beautifully where you had this, right away I was like, oh, things need to start happening to him. He suddenly sprung to life because the prince is in love with him. Megan is trying to protect him, keep him a secret. She doesn't want anyone to know he's actually her son. So as soon as you see people react to the NPCs, that's an NPC you have to push, right? You have to go, why do you like them? Well, here's more reasons to like them. Or why do you hate them? Here's more reasons to hate them. Because when those big things start to happen, I think it makes it all the kind of sweeter and all the more resonant for more people and for more players at the table effectively.
That's interesting that you point out the person who already has an inkling to like or is positive towards an NPC, that you're going to push on that and create deeper relationship along that spectrum. And for the character that is negative towards them, you're going to push that negativity rather than trying to make it more nuanced. You like to actually grow or push them along the spectrum they're already inclined towards. That's really interesting.
I do actually. I tend to think I have a bit of like a KISS, keep it simple, stupid perspective on GMing on some level, which is that like, I'm trying to remember who told me this. I don't remember who it was, but someone once made a point to me that when you're running a game, like subtlety is actually very hard, especially when you're kind of emceeing in a low prep on the fly sort of thing. Like the big thing in the story kind of gets people's attention more than the thing you're trying to do very subtly. The subtle thing will be missed or will be misunderstood, or if it's understood by one player at the table, maybe not by another player at the table. So to me, my instinct is always to kind of lean into what seems obvious on some level, right? To give you another example from our current game, right away, I gave Joe's character a mother. I just said, okay, you're the prince. You have sort of a queen mother. And I said in the very first scene in the entire game was Joe being prepared for like his coronation ceremony, his character Veal being prepared for his coronation ceremony while his mother watched. And right away, Joe began interacting with his mother in this way where she was kind of a pain. He was like, yes, mother, fine, mother. And I was like, oh, I get it. And I leaned way the hell into that, right? It was like, if Joe treats her like she's a pain, like I swung for the rafters with how just overbearing and imperious and arrogant she was. She treated everyone around her with this sort of haughtiness, and it actually worked. Like it made sense of why Joe treated her that way. Like you said, it kind of took this direction that they were already going in and justified it and sped it up. You kind of hit the pedal to the floor. That's my instinct. I'm sure there are people who do it in other ways and it works just as well. But yeah, my instinct tends to be like, if you like this person, good. I'm going to give you another reason to like them, because if they die, it's going to really, you're going to feel it then. Or if you don't like this person, I'm going to give you another reason not to like them, because if they stand in your way, you're going to hate them even more when they're kind of, an obstacle for you. True.
Yeah, and this falls right in line with the way that Apocalypse World wants NPCs to be presented.
Right.
They think a certain way, so that's really interesting. So we've talked a little bit about SCUP, so I'd like to jump on over, and if we could open our brain to this game, I'd really like that. What do you think?
That sounds good to me.
Open your brain. All right. Now we're going to open our brain and learn a bit about The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power. This is a game that was kickstarted, that you are releasing the digital form on DriveThruRPG. So as this episode comes out, people have a chance to jump on it. Tell me about SCUP. What's the setting? What's it about?
So my friend Tom and myself, a number of years ago, Tom, we had played a game of Apocalypse World with our regular group, and he said, I kind of want to do something fantasy-esque, a bit kind of Game of Thrones. You're not really going on a quest, but like fantasy politics, courtly fantasy. We kind of looked at a couple different games, and none of them seemed right. We had just played some Apocalypse World, and he said, that would work pretty well. And actually at the time, there was Dungeon World, but once again, that's more of a questing game.
Right.
We just kind of played Apocalypse World, but said, you're in a fantasy setting. And it worked. So we, like almost every session, we'd kind of look at each other afterwards and go, well, what worked in this session? What didn't work? And we'd start to kind of edit it. A lot of what we found was that the core of it really worked pretty well. The kind of main moves and stats worked pretty well. It was a lot of the kind of accoutrements around it. Like we needed some different character classes, and the characters needed different moves, and there needed to be some sort of slightly different things going on with regard to some of the kind of external mechanics to it, the stuff that kind of beyond the kind of core moves and stats. So that's really where we concentrate a lot of our energy, was writing, setting appropriate moves for the characters, and writing kind of extra stuff to make the status of the world feel real. So the setting, players create the setting themselves. We have a mythology creation exercise where they create a foundational mythology for their world. It's supposed to be a fantasy world, like sort of thinking kind of Game of Thrones, Joe Abercrombie novels, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Then once they do that, the idea is the character classes are mostly built around people who are powerful in some way, either physically powerful, someone who is a mercenary or a bandit of some kind, socially powerful, someone who is a courtier or has a lot of social power, or someone who is magically powerful. They have kind of the ability to bend the, kind of whatever the magic power in their world is to their will, effectively. And we kind of thought of those three things as the way that characters were powerful. Some characters split the difference between them, but then how is each person in this world powerful, either socially, physically, or mystically, effectively? And the whole point of the game is to kind of create a bunch of people who all are facing towards each other. To borrow Will Polachek's language in the book, she wrote a nice little essay for it where she talks about SCUP being an inward-facing game often, where the player characters are kind of pointed at each other. How do they kind of then interact? How do they have this sort of intrigue-driven game that's very much about court politics or jockeying for position or hierarchy among kind of a group of very powerful people in a fantasy setting?
Would you say that court politics is where the majority of the action takes place?
It technically doesn't have to be. There's nothing that says in the game you have to play this as a game about court politics. What we do say is that we want it to be about a particular place. So I've played games of SCUP where what you have is, it kind of depends on who people create. So sometimes in a game of SCUP, what you'll have is people will create a bunch of characters who are very centered around politics, effectively. You create a crown, who is, the ruler of the city or the kingdom or whatever. You create the voice, who is an advisor to that person. You create, a lyre or a beloved. The beloved is a prophet or a priest. The lyre is a artist. And they're all kind of centered around courtly politics, effectively. We've played games like that work perfectly well. Conversely, you could make a game where you created someone who's a gauntlet, who is a mercenary, who often usually works for someone in power. And then you might have a bit more violence in the game. So to give you an example, I just ran a game at a con, or two games at a con, and one of the games was very centered around kind of court politics and intrigue. There was no one violent in the game. I don't think anything violent happened in the game. It was very much around people spying on each other and kind of enlisting each other for information to undermine each other, jockeying for position among a group of kind of nobles who didn't trust each other. The other game was almost all violence. It was a gauntlet was kind of the one of the main characters, and he immediately was tasked with going to rout out a bunch of brigands who were, surrounding the town. One of the other people was a Black Hood, who's the assassin, and he was kind of, trying to murder some of the nobles. So it can kind of go in either direction, but the idea is that it's less a game about fantasy questing and more a game about the politics and relationships going on in a single particular place at a particular time, where you're going to see I always kind of think a good thing to set SCUP up around is to set it up around a festival, a coronation, a great event, a wedding, a feast, a funeral, the changing of power from, one dynasty to another. Kind of pick some transitionary period to set your game around. I always think that's a good thing to give it some meat, where it's like people are wondering who's going to be next in succession, or people are, all kind of, clamoring for recognition in this festival or whatever it is. So it's about the kind of politics of a particular location, a particular place.
Very cool. Okay, I get it. So you talked about taking Apocalypse World as the chassis and new playbooks and the like. I'm curious, what are the mechanics that you would consider most different from Apocalypse World? So I come from Apocalypse World, I come into a game of SCUP. What's going to be different? What could whiplash me there?
So I mentioned we have the world creation, which you do at the beginning, which is a bit more of a formal exercise than you have in Apocalypse World for this. And then a number of the things we have, we're trying to make status feel very real in the game. So off the top of my head, we have a chapter that kind of ties all this together in the book on three main things. We have patrons, factions, and honor. So patrons are a thing in Apocalypse War, or I'm sorry, in the Sword of the Crown, the Unspeakable Power, where you have characters can have essentially a boss. A number of the characters, about half the character classes, start out with a patron, and almost any character class can be given a patron by the fiction, and we have rules for it. With you have a patron, they can give you orders. You are paid for working for them, but they can also give you orders at the beginning of each session. You'll roll to see how your relationship with your patron is doing, and that might shape how they interact with you. You'll find out from that if they're mad at you, if they've given you something to do and they're not happy with how it turned out, or conversely, if they're happy with you. This factors into then honor and factions. So honor is a currency that each character has that represents sort of how far their name carries, how much people respect them, how much people need them. And you can spend your honor to achieve things. So you can spend your honor to have people have heard something impressive about you, which will help you interact with them. You can spend your honor to refuse to do things that are demanded of you by your patron or by other people with leverage over you. And you have what's called a faction. A faction is the group of people that you have some allegiance to. You don't have to like them, but they are the people that your status rises and falls with. If you are a noble, it might be your noble family. If you're an artist, it might be, the art clique you're a part of. If you are a worker, it might be the proletarian workers of the city. It could be a secret society, but the people who your agenda is kind of tied to. And part of what honor does is allow you to activate your faction in some way. So, one of the examples we give in the book is you could sort of imagine if someone wanted to get into a party, right, but they weren't invited. If their faction is people who are, well respected among the nobility, you could spend some of your honor to have someone from your faction pull some strings for you and get you in. But when you use your faction, it also generates the ability for the MC to flip that around on you and say, well, but if your faction did a favor for you, now you have to do a favor for them. So these are kind of the three interlocking things that all kind of work together to make status feel a bit more weighty and real in SCUP. Additionally to that, we specifically created different kinds of MC moves for different kinds of characters. So in Apocalypse World, the MC makes moves against the players. What we did is we took that idea and said, what if the MC did different things depending on whether or not the character was high status or low status?
Oh, that's sharp.
Yeah, this was kind of something that we were proud of when we came up with. So, if you're the king, you have a different set of things to worry about than like if you're an artist who lives in the wrong side of the tracks, effectively. You both have things to worry about. There's different things. So some of the MC moves for the king are things like, challenge them with revolts from below or give them word of whisperings behind their back. Whereas the stuff for the more common characters, more proletarian characters, are things like, show them everything they could stand to gain or crush them under the weight of the kind of, inequality of the system. They're designed to kind of show that the burdens of power are to have to fight to keep that power, and that the burdens of poverty and the burdens of subordination are to have to be crushed by the systemic inequality of the society you live in. So we are trying to kind of highlight with all these interlocking things in the Sword of the Crown, the Unspeakable Power, unlike, say, Apocalypse World, where, Apocalypse World, it's given that it's a post-apocalyptic setting, status is a little different, right? But in the Sword of the Crown, the Unspeakable Power, you're often playing in a setting where status is very, very institutionalized. It's very, very, it's burrowed into people's lives often. There are noble families, there are noble houses, there are different strata and classes of people in a lot of kind of dark fantasy settings. And we wanted to make that something that had some mechanical teeth in some way, that you had someone above you, you might have someone below you, and that the hierarchy, and you might have people that you had a loyalty or an allegiance to, and it was improper for you to not return favors they did for you. That sort of thing is all stuff that we were trying to highlight with these moves.
All right, well, Todd, what is your favorite move in SCUP and why?
I'm going to take this in two directions. One is There's a move that I have always really liked from the class called the Beloved, which is the kind of prophet, preacher, priest character class called It Knows You. And this move allows the Beloved to go and basically fight in either combat or intellectual bargaining or social conflict an NPC's inner demons. And if you best their inner demons, you change the NPC permanently.
Wow.
The idea is, we kind of got a case. The first time someone actually rolled it at the table, we were like, yes, it does exactly what we wanted it to do. It just says, you go into prayer and you confront a manifestation of their inner demons that somehow represents their fears, their worst thoughts, their worst actions. And if you best it, you get to pick some way that the NPC is permanently changed. They become a better person. They forget something like that. We tried to go big with the moves. We wanted big narrative shaping moves that were like people look at their sheet and go like, I only get one move when I advance because I'd like 2 or 3 of these. Following from that, we have something in here that I don't think I've seen in any other PBTA game. And I can tell you the impetus for it. Tom and I were talking and we said, how could we mechanize the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones? Or Ned Stark, sorry, spoilers for an old book and an old TV show now, but Ned Stark's death at the end of, book 1/season 1 of Game of Thrones. How do we mechanize that, right? How do we make that a thing that would happen at the table? So we came up with something we called end of season moves, which are when you reach the second tier of advancements, you can take an end of season move. So you are choosing to take this if you're a player. This is you basically saying, I want to go out in a blaze of glory. So like one of them is you take it, and anytime you do anything that hurts another person, eventually when you get to 3, you make a mark anytime you hurt someone else. When you make 3 marks, people you care about, the MC has like full permission to just wipe out people you care about or love or need. And then you start over until basically you change your ways. One of them is anytime you experience a moment of joy or happiness, make a mark. When you reach 3 marks, you die horribly and everything in your world comes crashing down around you. You and the MC will work out how.
Wow.
One of them is anytime you use magic, make a mark. And when you reach 3 marks, something bonkers happens. Either, something comes in from some other dimension and takes over your body and you're dead. And then each time we say, if the game continues, create a new character and you get 1 free advance. But this is like, if you've been playing for a while, and especially if you're thinking of maybe stopping playing or putting it down for a couple months and then coming back to it later, and you don't want to just kind of have your character ride off into the sunset. You want to go out with a blaze of kind of Ned Starkian glory. You want to go down as one of the Starks, basically. You can take one of these moves and it'll set you up nicely and kind of give the MC permission to say, okay, this is about to get real bad, and you go, yep, that's what I'm going for. So yeah, we were really stoked on those moves, and when people take them for a ride, we're always really happy with it.
Well, I don't know if we would have time to give one of those moves a ride.
That's a bit further afield, but yeah.
But I'd love it if you could run a quick demo of the game for me so we could see how it plays.
That would be great.
It is time to act under fire.
In Act Under Fire, the designer or guest will run a quick demo of the game that we're talking about. I'm very excited because Todd's already an amazing MC, and now he gets to show me how SCUP goes. So Todd, take it away.
So, I'm going to place us in one of the pre-gen settings the book comes with, which is the city of Karin Narel. Karin Narel is a desert ziggurat city, surrounded by kind of this vast desert full of creatures, all manner of kind of sphinxes and things like that. And every year they have this ceremony. It's ruled by a high priestess and her council, and every year they do this ceremony. It's something called the Festival of Tamah, where the high priestess, her name is Zalika, she threatens to read aloud these words on these tablets that are kind of kept under the ziggurat unless someone agrees to venture out into the desert and basically sacrificing themselves to the gods for the good of the city. Everyone knows that if she reads these words, it will split the earth in two, basically. So you are playing a voice who is like the kind of assistant to it's a character class. It's an assistant to power, effectively. So I'm going to go ahead and start by reading a love letter to your character, and we can get going.
Okay.
Plussy, you have been running around trying to prepare everything for High Priestess Zalika's speech at the Festival of Tamah. Each year, the people of Karin Narel assemble, and the High Priestess threatens to read aloud the cursed words on the tablets locked beneath the ziggurat, unless someone agrees to sacrifice themselves by wandering alone into the vast, creature-filled desert to appease the gods. Much of your duties involve the usual: preparing her outfit, planning the feast afterwards, ensuring that water will be made available. Your title, after all, is Waterbringer, as has been the title of all in your line who have served the priestesses. Yet Zalika gave you an additional duty: to find the one who would volunteer, quote unquote, for the long walk into the desert. And as a clear test of your loyalty, you kind of understand that, this is why she's doing this. She suggested you convince someone you care about to do it. She gave you a specific person. So first, who was that person? Who does Plussy care about? And that perhaps Zalika would, as a test of Plussy is a he?
Yes.
As a test of his loyalty, would ask to convince to sacrifice themselves at the Festival of Tamah.
Plussy has chosen his sister,
Okay.
Lashta.
Lashta,
yes. She has fallen on hard times and has a few kids to take care of. So I've chosen her because there's a great amount of honor for anyone who volunteers. And that's how I have convinced her.
Okay. So we're going to start by having you roll your patron move, because you have a patron. Your patron is High Priestess Zalika. So we're going to go ahead and start by having you roll a patron move. So it's 2d6 plus, since you are a voice, it's going to be the stat Wily, which is a stat that's basically about how cunning you are, about how kind of convincing you are.
Using roll for your party, I have rolled a 3 and a 1 with my +1 because I'm Plussy. That is still a failure at a pitiful 5.
So on a miss with the patron move, your patron is angry at you. You and the player of your patron should work out why. Here's going to be my suggestion. I think that what's happened is that, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree with this, I think that what's happened is Lashta agreed. Lashta said, of course I will do that. It will bring great honor to our family. Of course I'll do that. It'd be an honor to sacrifice myself at the Festival of Tamah. And then the evening before the festival happens basically in the afternoon, the great afternoon sun. The evening before the festival, she just vanished. No one knows where she is. No one knows what's happened. And I kind of think we start in media res with Zalika and some of the other folks on her council have effectively called you to them for a late night meeting to kind of figure out what to do next. Does that work for you?
That works for me.
Okay. Do you have the voice sheet in front of you if you want to use any of those moves or use any of the basic moves?
I do.
Excellent. What I picture is that there's this long stone table with I almost imagine if the 10 Commandments were a table. It kind of looks like that with these kind of long carvings in it of all the commandments of the city and all kind of the laws of the city. In this kind of long room, slotted windows line the walls, and the moonlight is pouring in. And as the moon kind of moves through the sky, the light is progressing along the table. So you're at one end of the table, Zalika is at the far end, her council is there, and they're all eyeing you suspiciously. And Zalika is in the middle of basically chastising you for this. And she says, Plussy, I thought you, of all people, would recognize the importance of this ceremony. We need someone to volunteer. It has always been a tradition that the person who volunteers is selected by the Waterbringer. Why have you failed me in this?
Oh, great Zalika. I understand the importance of this event. It is the single most important day of every festival of every year. You know that I listened to
to your request. I chose my own blood, and she agreed for this honor, for all of our people. After all that we have offered, why would she disappear?
As Zalika rises and as you're talking, begins to make her way around the table. As she passes by each window, her shadow casts over the moonlight that's on the table. And she's walking around. She cuts you off with a wave of her hand, and she says, I have no doubt that you spoke to your sister. Were you convincing enough? Why would she leave? What do you know about her that would cause her to do this? And all eyes on the table are on you. You can feel them just kind of boring into you as they're trying to search you for, did you set this up? Did you not go through with it? Were you not convincing enough? Did she chicken out? Is that what happened? You could feel sort of their judgment on you effectively.
I look among the council.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one missing or more among them who didn't make it?
Ooh, good question. Yes, you notice that someone named, you can also, of course, study a situation. You notice that someone named Kalison, there's an empty seat where Kalison usually sits.
Oh.
Kalison is older, a relative, maybe a cousin, you think, second cousin, something like that, of the High Priestess. Bit quiet, bit haughty. He is not there.
I would like to study this situation. I have an inkling that perhaps Kalison is, if not involved, needs to be involved here. But let me see that. So I've just rolled a 5 plus 1, a 6. Another failure. This is wonderful.
You get to ask one question, but I also get to make my move. So go ahead and ask your question first.
How is one of my adversaries vulnerable to me now?
So here's what you pick up. You're looking around the table, and you notice Kalison's seat is empty. You also know that Kalison has a kind of second or third cousin named Dabia, who he's very close with. She is there. And when you notice Kalison's empty seat, immediately you look over and see Dabia sort of eyeing you nervously. She looks at Kalison's seat. She looks at you. She looks at the High Priestess. And you figure out that something is up. Dabia and Kalison are in on this somehow. And it is probably true that without Kalison there to defend himself, you might be able to shift the attention to him, at least somewhat, if you can be convincing enough to Zalika. In fact, you're somewhat sure that he must be in on this somehow. His family have always wanted to be water bringers and never have had the privilege to be water bringers. This would be a good opportunity to mess with you and to mess with someone who is from a line of water bringers. So perhaps that this is what's going on here. This seems like a likely route, and maybe since he's not here, you can throw some doubt on him.
Okay. High Priestess Zalika, you understand that my life is in your hands, and I care not for that as much as I care for the plot that must be afoot here. This is not a black mark upon me. It is a black mark upon all of Corinne Norell. I look among those you call your closest confidants, and I see that not everyone is here in this pivotal moment. And then my eyes fix on the empty seat.
The High Priestess's eyes follow to the seat, and she turns back to you. Her eyebrow raises, and she says, "Go on, Waterbringer."
So I'd like to try to engage the move Whisper Darkness from the voice.
Oh, please do. That's what I was hoping you would do.
High Priestess Zalika, I do not wish to speak ill of your family, but look upon Dabia. Notice how Kalison is not here. They have always sought what you have given me. They wish to steal it from your wisdom.
Dabia pounds her fist on the table, stands up, and begins to yell. I mean, like, she's outrageous. And the High Priestess kind of snaps and puts her hand to her and says, "Let him go on." And Dabia slowly slinks back into her seat. And the High Priestess leans in towards you. Now her shadow is kind of looming over you and says, "Are you suggesting Kalison and Dabia are somehow behind this?"
Should I roll the move?
Roll the move.
All right. I've gotten a 7. Holy crap.
Wow, okay. So you get to choose one from that list, but I get to choose one consequence as well.
I wish to convince her that someone is against her.
Perfect. Okay, go ahead. Speak your darkness to her.
High Priestess, you are closer to the zenith. You are wiser than I. I am but a humble servant, pointing out to you what seems to be amiss here.
The High Priestess slowly turns towards Dabia, who is sort of blanched. And she turns back to you. She turns back to Dabia. And she now kind of turns her whole body to look upon Dabia. And she says, "Perhaps we have found who our sacrifice will be after all." And all the eyes of the council slowly turn towards Dabia, who is now just, stammering, right? She's going, "But this is outrageous. This can't be." The High Priest holds up her hand to silence her. And then she turns back to you and says, "But in the meantime, we must find Kalison. I do not trust that she will assist us in this matter." And Dabia is still sort of stammering about this as guards are now moving towards her to essentially place her under arrest. The High Priestess walks back towards you and says, "I trust that by the festival tomorrow, you will have found Kalison. I can trust you on this? You have already failed me with regard to your sister. I wouldn't want to see what happens if you fail me again, Waterbringer."
I will not fail you again, High Priestess. Thank you for this opportunity to make sure that the festival continues without a hitch.
And as you're saying that, guards are literally dragging Dabia out of the room behind you as the council almost all just turns to you like this is totally normal, and they're all just going to ignore the fact that this woman is, being dragged to the dungeon because she's going to be sacrificed tomorrow. And she's screaming at you, just, "You traitor, how dare you?" And finally, the door slams behind her. You can hear her muffled yelling, "What a traitor you are, and how dare you. Your lowly family will suffer for this," as she's dragged down the hallway.
Oh my goodness, that is such a wonderful little snippet. Oh man, is Plussy going to find that gross and terrible Kalison? I don't know. That has to be true. Thank you so much, Todd. I really appreciate you coming on to talk to me about SCUP.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Awesome. And so Wheel Tree Press, the game is available on drive-thru as this episode comes out. It's PDF, print on demand. Is it print on demand?
Print on demand too, yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you again, Todd. And Wheel Tree Press has their own website, correct?
Yep, Wheel Tree Press at .wordpress.com is the best way to find us.
Awesome.
If you Google Wheel Tree Press, we come right up too. So
that's some nice SEO, bro.
There you go.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at @+1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD, Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.